Hello, everyone. I wanted to address a topic that is coming up a lot lately. I see people mentioning this and talking about it, and I wanted to give my own perspective on it and a really kind of in-depth, more full circle perspective on divine or sacred union, which is something a lot of people are talking about. So, what is that, first of all? What is sacred union? First of all, it's a subjective definition to what this term is, right? It's going to mean different things to different people, but there are more collective universal themes that are tied into it. And I'm going to explore a lot of that from that perspective, obviously with my own subjective interpretation into it. But it's also a definition to something that has a progressive aspect to it, meaning that as our species evolves and as individuals choose to personally evolve, because that's where a lot of this is coming from, then the definition of what we call a sacred union or a divine union is also going to change. So let's bring it right back to the beginning. Let's start with us as a species, not necessarily as individuals. So as a species, we have evolved throughout most of our lives in this life, and our ancestors, the genetics, the people that came before us have evolved in a state of fight or flight, you could say, or in a almost stressed out survival kind of mode. And as a result of this, much of their human personalities or their human identity has been conditioned by this fight or flight response to life overall. So essentially what I mean by fight or flight is something dramatic happens outside of you, your body wants to fight or flee. And when that happens, your body is going to start producing adrenaline, neuroepinephrine, these different survival hormones that causes your body to engage, to take action. The blood goes out of the core of your body and it goes into your extremities in order to fight or to run away or hide, whatever is necessary for a survival instinct when you're trying to survive. But also, it means that as a species, we have been living in our lower three centers, right? We hear the chakras, the energy centers, the dantians, depending on which school of thought or religious ideology or whatever ties into the human body, its potential, and what it means. So that essentially, in this case, means that when we're in a survival response or a fight or flight or stress response, we are primarily in our lower three centers, meaning our sexual centers, our digestive centers, and our solar plexus, which is like the power center. Essentially, it's like the ego, you could say. It's like the seat of the ego, of our personal power, of who we think we are. So if we are, obviously, we know how our sexual response works when we're in a fight or flight mentality. We're thinking about reproducing to keep the species alive, right? It's such a deep biological driver that perpetuates human life and all life to go on, right? The need to reproduce to keep the species going. So a lot of the way we interact with each other is based upon these primal drives, even if we don't realize it. Again, much of our personality is conditioned or fashioned according to these primal drives. Second, the desire to eat, right? We eat to live, to survive. You know, the idea of eating for nutrition, for comfort, for pleasure. We're starting to get into that stuff, right? We're looking at new ways to do that now, but a lot of it is still driven on the need to survive. Like, most of our ancestors have had periods of time where there's famine, or even in just their personal lives, depressions, things where food wasn't as plentiful so that you could eat and enjoy it and love it. And then third, our solar plexus, which is like the personal power. Because we're living in these primarily lower three centers of our being, then our power place, our personal power place, becomes one where we are focused on ego, right? On a self-oriented nature instead of a selfless-oriented nature. So let's bring it back a little bit. As a species, us and everybody we know have been living like this, and we have evolved to live in this fight or flight state of being where our body's very consistently producing stress hormones and stress responses to the circumstances of life, to the degree that it has so deeply conditioned and fashioned our human personalities. So even those who strive for higher virtues or, a moral ethical code still feels the power of these deep primal and biological markers that propel us to live through life, to move onward, to create. So from that perspective, our human personality is that. It's based on that, and we don't even realize how much of our human personality is based upon this fight or flight mentality. Okay? So much of who we think we are is based upon this. Now, here's what is happening as a result of our world. We are evolving, right? Suddenly a lot of people are waking up and they're realizing that the way we have evolved as a species up until this point isn't working. It's not in harmony with the natural world around us, and the root cause of that is because we're not in tune with our own innate personal nature, which is selfless. It's not selfish, it's selfless, meaning that you aren't just this flesh and blood physical being who's only thinking about reproducing, eating to survive, and then feeling all smug and egoic about it because you were able to reproduce and survive, right? So instead of that, we are looking at, all right, a species that realizes this is not sustainable. They don't want to. Many of us don't want to live like this anymore. And instead of just being like, oh, we don't know what to do, throw our hands up, there's nothing we can do about it, many of us are being like, okay, doing the exact opposite. What can we do about it? And even to this extent, like I'll speak for me, like I want to take full responsibility for this human condition. And if I was to take full responsibility for it, what does that mean for me personally? Okay, suddenly you are no longer just like, oh, I'm just going to let everything be what it is. You are choosing to truly be with your own nature, come to terms with it, and essentially rise above your own conditioning. Okay, so what that looks like is this. When you've made that decision, you've decided like, okay, I'm not able to be part of a species that is living in a way that is disconnected from the natural world and disconnected from our own internal nature. So it looks like this. You've made that decision to ascend or rise above these lower aspects of yourself. And that means you calm down, you relax, you get into a state of contemplation, and you start to love your own existence, okay? You love life. Even if you don't like it, you choose to start loving it, okay? So that's the second part of it. First part is you've made the decision that you are going to rise above whatever it is, no matter what. The second part is you choose to feel elevated emotions or love or whatever. You choose to feel these feelings that are going to bring you above your own conditioning. That's the next step. And let me give a great analogy here that really a lot of people get, because this is where we are very driven by these primal markers and these primal states of being. So people can identify with it when you speak in this way. So I'm going to go back to a time in your life where you've had a sexual fantasy about somebody, right? We all know what happens. Like if you think about that person and what it would be like to have sex with them, and you get into this whole, almost like a daydream. For a lot of people when they're young, this happens. Some people it happens their whole life, but you get into this like daydream state. You get all excited. You're like, oh man, what would it be like to have sex with this person? And then we all know what happens. The body's biological response sends, because that's what you're focusing on, you're thinking about what that is like, all of your attention and energy goes to your genitals. So in men, the penis will swell and get hard. In women, the vagina gets wet. Same kind of thing. We start getting ready for sex. Our body is getting ready for sex. So that's what happens in most of us. But what happens if you instead choose to have a fantasy about how much you love yourself and your life or this world or something, and you actively engage in the consideration and pursuit of imagining and feeling what the world or your life would look like were that fantasy to become true? Something very amazing happens. Is the same way that all that energy and blood goes into your sexual organs, that energy goes right into your heart. And the same way your sexual organs swell up with blood and get prepared for sex, that energy and that blood goes right into your heart. Your heart enlarges, and you are preparing yourself to be able to love even greater than you ever have. Okay, anybody can try this. I have put this to the test. I have sat with this against all odds when everything in my outer environment would convince me that I shouldn't be in love with life, that I should be angry or frustrated or sad or what, and everything was working against me choosing to rise above my own biological and egotistical response, normal egoic response to the circumstances of life. So by loving, by really rising in love, just deciding that you're going to love unconditionally, even if you don't like what you're experiencing, your heart fills with blood, and you start to generate feelings within you that are profound. They allow you to perceive things in a way that you normally don't when you're just stuck in these lower three centers. So without getting into a whole thing on this, which I will, and many other things, I'll go deep into all this stuff. By choosing to rise in love with life and engage in this heart-centric love affair with your own existence and the existence and the world around you, you then get out of these three lower centers and you get into the heart center, the middle of your being. And when that happens and you've really, really chosen that you're going to love the appearance of life unconditionally, then you open up the pathways to the higher centers of the body. Just for really simply, the throat chakra, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the upper centers that most of us are not in because we have generationally evolved to perceive reality according to these lower three centers, and everybody that we know perceives them like that. And so we've just accepted it as normal and feel like, well, we're helpless. We're biological beings. This is who we are as a result of what has happened, and we don't want to take any responsibility for it. So that's what it's like for most of us, for most people. But those of us who've chosen, like, we're not going to stand for that, we're going to rise above it, we are taking radical responsibility for our own body, our own responses to others. And instead of, oh, I want to have sex with this person so I can mate, or just so I can feed this egoic center that has evolved as a result of doing that, you're like, nope, not going to do that. I'm going to instead live and let all that go for now. And I'm going to love life and others and everything at a capacity that I didn't even know I was able to until I started doing this. So that analogy I made is a really, really powerful one. When you instead of having a sexual fantasy and just letting that energy go there, you can have these fantasies everywhere, with every center, with every part of your body. And when you do, you will feel the energy and the blood going into that center, opening it up, activating it, and giving birth to a new potential that is manifesting and evolving through your very physical being. But you have to choose to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. You know, a lot of people think, oh, God's going to do it for me. Maybe if everything's divinely orchestrated and it's made up, okay, great. But I know that for me, if I have any ability to choose or any free will whatsoever, I'm going to choose to evolve to my greatest potential, because witnessing what our species has been going through doesn't work for me. You know, seeing this competitive fight or flight, dog eat dog, you know, all these things that we've been conditioned to think is the nature of reality is not the nature of reality. Okay, yes, people say, oh, well, nature, things are like that. When animals fight or they're competing or they're mating, what they don't see is that that is part of an evolutionary process that is not in competition with itself. It's actually in support of itself. It's the law of cooperation. It's so many other elements that you don't see that are actively a participant in the co-creative end manifestation of two beings fighting or mating or whatever. Nature works to support you. So let's look at that from a much greater perspective. The universe, okay, is a coherent structure. There is way more order in the universe than there is disorder. They both exist and they need to exist. One can't exist without the other, but there is much more coherence, meaning that everything is working together to perpetuate the state of the whole, than there is other forces working against it to erode it or break it down. Okay, not to say that it can't be like that, it could, but overall, the general nature of life is an expansive state. The universe is expanding, or the part of it that we're in anyway, we are in an expansive state. So if human consciousness is not in an expansive state while all this is happening, then we're going against the flow of the natural world. Like me personally, I'm going to make a different choice no matter how hard it is, you know, even from swimming upstream, because I know that to make a choice, to not make a choice, or to not do everything that I can, then I'm not willingly participating in the co-creation of how my life could look from a much more majestic and divine perspective. And I'm going to tie into the sacred union, but I wanted to explain all this stuff because, again, I said at the beginning of this, I wanted to give a more in-depth explanation of what this term divine union or sacred union means, because having an understanding of this background is going to be much more, it will enable you to be able to perceive the potential of everything that I'm suggesting here, and it will also empower you to be able to do a lot more about it. So, okay, back into this. So the person who has chosen to get above their lower three centers, to open up their heart, to get into their higher centers, start when you've done that and you've made up your mind to do that, and you've been like, okay, even if it means I'm not going to have sex, even if it means I'm not going to have a relationship forever, okay, that's the kind of commitment that I've made to it. Yes, okay, I went to prison. I spent a lot of time by myself in a situation where I wasn't interested in having sex and I knew I wasn't going to. So, you know, I decided, like, what am I going to do with this energy? And part of this process that I'm talking about is recognizing that there is an external and an internal definition or perception or perspective of sexual energy. And when we're in this fight or flight state, we are living according to this external kind of view of what sexual energy is, meaning that we're living in a reproductive, we're thinking about reproducing to keep the species alive. But when you realize that there's a whole internal perspective, an internal perspective of what sexual energy has the potential to be, then something amazing begins to happen. Because it's just like that analogy that I made. When you take your sexual energy, your creative energy, or your awareness, whatever, and instead of just focusing it on this sexual energy in your genitals, and that's a great example, like I said, because a lot of people can relate to it. But again, you can have that same fantasy with your heart, with every other center of your body, but it's starting with your heart is the most important, because one, you got to make the decision to do this. Two, you got to start generating new feelings about life, and then that will begin to give you a perspective into new possibilities for your own existence. So, all right, let's get back to this. The person who has chosen to move beyond their biological markers, to direct their sexual energy internally to activate these dormant energy centers of the mind and body. The person who has done that and done it for a long enough amount of time begins to experience something profound, in that you're not just identifying with your sense of self as a flesh and blood biological machine. You are instead hyper aware of this energy that is animating your being, that's causing your heart to beat, that's causing all of these incredible physiological reactions taking place in your body faster than the speed of light. And you, instead of identifying with things from this survival perspective, you're able to, because you're in this relaxed, open, expansive state, you're able to start tying in all these possibilities that you weren't aware of before, when you were stuck in a lower, primitive state of evolutionary process as it pertains to the human being. So when you're in this expanded state, you're becoming aware of yourself as this energy form. That is what is referred to as becoming a sovereign being. Okay, and again, that's another subjective thing. People are going to have different definitions of that. But to me, that's what it means. It's an individual who has chosen to ascend or rise above the limits of their own evolutionary process for where they have gotten to be at that point in their life. And they are rising above, they are evolving, and they are coming into a state where they feel so whole, they feel so complete, because they are now in alignment with this greater coherent structure of the entire living universe. And when you feel that, you don't feel like you need to have sex to survive. You don't feel like you need to eat to survive. You don't feel like you need to be an egomaniac, because you are none of those things. You are literally the energy that is animating your being, and it is not stuck or specific to any one center of your being. It is all of them, it's all through them, and it's all around them. And you, instead of just seeing yourself as the human identity that you believe yourself to be and that the world has taught you are then perceiving yourself as this energy source that you truly are. And in that comes the recognition that you are part of a unified field of conscious energy that is literally connected to and through everybody, everything, everywhere, at all times, in no time, beyond everything that you used to perceive in your fight or flight state of perception before you were able to ascend or rise above it. So when you've done that and you've gotten into it, you are suddenly in what you could refer to as a sovereign state of being as a human being, meaning that you don't need anybody or anything to complete you, because you have chosen to identify with the energy that is animating your being, or the quantum field, or God, or the universe, whatever name you want to give to the pure source of energy that is allowing you to exist and perceive through your human senses. When you've given that energy your primary directive, your attention, your focus, and you've made that number one, not sex with somebody else, not eating to survive, not thinking you're great about that. So when you're in a state of sovereignty, of wholeness, of completion within and unto yourself, then you feel like everything is possible, because everything is possible. And that feels way better to you than all of the previous limitations of your fight or flight wired human self that had evolved up to that point, that you're not willing to sacrifice that. You're not willing to, your frequency has been raised so much as a result of doing that, that you're not willing to lower your frequency to come back into old ways of being. Now, you will, in the process, as all this is happening, you will come back down. Okay, it happens. Things happen, you know. And as I speak all this stuff to you and say it, I don't want to give the impression that I'm some ascended immortal being, because I'm not. I've fucked up. I made some really, really hardcore decisions that have caused me to learn things in a really intense way. But I've always known that there was something way greater outside of, or connected to, or intrinsic with my perception of reality. And so even through the bad choices I've made, or the really difficult situations I've been in, I've always known that something greater had the potential to pull me out of it. And I've put this to the test so many times, and that energy was always there to deliver me, or to bring me out of the suffering and everything that happened before. And every time it happens, you become a little bit more aware. You become more conscious of that which you didn't even realize was happening. And you become more conscious of your unconscious primal thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, actions that you were subjected to before all that, okay? And this is when things really start to happen. You know, it's just, you know, like, you know, if I wanted to really get into that state of being right now and what that looks like for me, I would be crying. I'd be bawling with tears of joy, because the feeling of it is so beyond anything I have ever felt with my regular in this life. And believe me, I've felt everything. So my point in saying all this is, when we choose to do this, it's not like, oh, just make a choice and it's done. Yes, you make a choice with firm amplitude. You make the choice that no matter what you have to face or go through, you're going to. But once you've made that choice, it's a progressive choice. It's something that's evolving with your own evolutionary process. You know, without taking this into a whole other realm, our soul has its own karmic play, or its own energetic stuff that it needs to work through in order for us in this life to move or evolve at a much greater, higher consciousness perspective. Everybody's at a different place in their life, and everybody has different things that they have to work through. But when you've made that decision that you're going to face it and get beyond it no matter what, and you have chosen to start feeling elevated emotions that you are generating from inside of you, that you are creating yourself, not leaving it to anybody or anything, which is what we've been taught in this world, right? That we need somebody or something to make us feel whole or to make us feel good. But when we get that someone or something, we only feel good for a minute. And then all of a sudden we go right back into the old patterns, because the only true wholeness or sovereignty is by us choosing to get beyond all of our biological drivers that have kept us hardwired into a prison of self. Take a little break here. So once you're experiencing yourself as a holistic or a sovereign being, and you've made that decision that you're not going to lower your frequency for anybody or anything ever again, even if it means you're going to be alone and you're not going to have sex and you're willing to do all of it, because the feeling of what it's like to have all these dormant energy centers of your entire being activated, and the feeling of what it's like to no longer be stuck in a personal prison of perception, or in a genetic prison of evolutionary perception that we've all been quote unquote plagued with, the feeling of that is such that as you begin to develop and evolve in this greater capacity, you become less and less willing, even in your mistakes, to come out of that highly evolved place, because it feels so incredible, and you know yourself and experience yourself as connected with reality as it truly is, and you're not willing to, it just doesn't make sense. You're like, why would you exchange this incredible feeling for something that just is temporary and short-lived? And but we learn, right? So those of us who know that we're doing this no matter what, even if we remain alone, even if we don't have sex, even if all of that, we are that committed to it, we are witnessing something incredible happen. Okay? In that, when you are committed to achieving those states of being, and you start to attract like frequencies that are resonating at or near or whatever, or in a complementary way to your own frequency. And imagine how you feel, right, when you're not just who you think you are and you're surviving, but you are, all this energy is moving through all your body and all around your body. How are you going to feel, right? What's your energy going to be like? You're going to feel whole. You're going to feel connected to what you truly are and why you truly exist. And from there, you're going to want to be like, okay, what's next? What's the potential? What can we do here with all this? So the idea of sacred union or divine union is, from my perspective, is when two individuals or more, whatever, but let's just keep it simple. When two individuals who have chosen personally that they are not going to sacrifice this holistic or sovereign state of coherence within their entire being, within the structures of the universe, and that they're consciously aware of all this process, they're not going to sacrifice that for anybody or anything that is less than that. When people have made that decision and they're feeling like that and their frequency is raised and they know that they're going to stay in that, you start recognizing that you have the potential to attract a new form of relationships, a new way of relating to one another. And this doesn't even at all have to be sexual. In fact, it shouldn't be, and it's really interesting because I've interacted. I just had something happen lately with a woman who, she got a hold of me. We came up, we met, and never kissed, never had nothing, no physical anything at all. And we were experiencing a level of connection and intimacy that was beyond the third dimension. It was just such a unified sense of perception that was emanating through us, and together we were enhancing and bringing this out in one another. And we were both like blown away. We just were like, oh my God, we're like, you're like a child with innocence and awe, and you're just bathing in the potential of this life force that's in you. And not to go into this whole thing, but we did end up triggering each other a lot, but we thought it was a totally karmic free connection, and it was for a while. But then stuff started happening. It's just our own shit, like our own stuff comes up, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just part of the process. Like, nobody's free and that's it, you're gone. As long as you're in this human body and you are committed to working through whatever it is that keeps you in a static or devolving or lower state, and you're committed to ascending beyond that, you're going to be facing things and you're going to be evolving through it. And if you get stuck, that's all right. You rest, you chill out for a little bit. But when you gather your strength back up, you're ready to go at it again. So the idea of divine union or sacred union is, from my perspective, this. It's anybody who has chosen to live with this independent sovereignty, first and foremost, by choosing to train themselves to focus the bulk of their attention on this life force that is animating our being and allowing us to exist, and making that habitual more than the fears that we experience to survive, because most of our fears are really based around survival. But when we've chosen to embrace and love the nature of what life is more than we are afraid of it or anything, then we become, our conscious perception of self and reality becomes supported by this greater coherent whole that exists in everyone and everything, and it always has, and there's no way we can't not exist outside of it or separate from it. It's happening to all of us. But we, due to this genetic and perceptual conditioning that we've all been subjected to, this ancestral conditioning, we've stayed in a lower kind of fight or flight state that's survival based. And so our frequency has been really contained and constricted. But when you get out of that, your frequency starts to rise and expand and get greater. So when you're living as a being of potential and you're feeling what the potential for all these different possibilities could be with relationships, with the way you connect to others, you, by virtue of your expansive state of being, seek to find others and things that enhance one another, that are in coherence with one another, because it's a new possibility of evolutionary expression through our perception of self and reality. And that's the nature of this expansive reality. It wants to know itself, it wants to evolve and grow into greater potentials and expressions of what it is that maybe itself has never even known. And so we are now in this state where we're co-creating or participating in this great evolutionary impulse that is super consciousness, that is just heaven on earth, and we're looking to ground that further into the cells of our being and into the planet around us. And we also seek to interact with others in a way that reflects that internal state of perception that we have so firmly decided that we're going to choose for ourselves. And this, my friends, is so beautiful. It is so powerful. And I believe this is where we are not only headed, but it's almost like we're being forced to head in this direction as a species, because this way of living in competition with one another, of fighting with one another, of all these things isn't working anymore. And many of us know that. Many of us know that, we realize that, and we're not going to settle for anything else. We're holding ourselves to a higher standard of possibility. I got all wound up for this one. I wanted to really bring some high energy to this talk, because you have to make the decision to do this with a lot of energy, and you need to just keep, you have to hold yourself to this new standard and do it. So I wanted to bring a lot of energy into this talk to really show you, to really help inspire you and motivate you to make this kind of a decision, because you're going against thousands of years of ancestral and genetic conditioning that is basically hardwired to focus on a primitive fight or flight way of life and perception. So, all right, back to this divine union. When we are in this state individually and we start to interact with others, we are, from that place, we're experiencing new possibilities. We're experiencing new potentials, and we love it. We're like, this is what we knew was possible. And whenever somebody comes into your life that reflects that possibility, that really is essentially an end result of you so dedicated and so devotionally committed to this life force inside of you, you are so grateful. Like this connection that I had with this woman that came up, even though it didn't end probably the way we both thought it would, we both felt the empowerment that came as a result of it. And this is going to be happening more and more with more and more people. And like I said, it's almost like it's happening now, whether we like it or not, because the way we were living before no longer is going to fly in the face of everything that's happening in the world. And we want to be free. We want to be whole. We want to live in a way that reflects our potential through us. We want to love others. We want to relate to others in an augmented and expansive way. And we can do that because it's happening. It's happening now more than ever. So again, it's not just sexual relationships. And in fact, it's not even sexual relationships at all. And being in a divine union with somebody doesn't mean like, okay, we're going to get married. No, those are all society's ideas and standards and traditions. I mean, maybe you get married, maybe it is that stuff, but you're not doing it because any external religious or governing body is deeming that a requirement. You're doing that because the person that you are choosing to co-create with is somebody that you set a standard for yourself. You're attracting relationships and connections that are reflecting this internal state that you've committed to, that you're devoted to. And you eventually, depending on whatever level you're at and whatever level you're committed to, you might just find somebody that is a perfect or a wonderful counterpart or similar reflection to what you envision your own potential to be. And in many ways, that's what these sacred unions are. And they don't have to be about sex. And in fact, I don't think they should be. I personally have made a decision that I am not going to have sex. I'm not going to engage in any of my human stuff unless I get stuck in it. Like, we still survive, we still have things, and believe me, I'm not perfect, but I have made this decision so uncompromisingly, and I continuously revisit it every single day, and I see results that really are like, okay, it propels me forward. So this is something that I'm so dedicated to, but I have made a decision. I'm not having sex with anybody unless there is such a profound, sovereign, sacred connection that they are feeling to their own state of being. And that's there or it's not. And in many of us, it's there to varying degrees. But the more in touch you are with that part of yourself, the more you're able to, because suddenly you're not just looking at life and others the way you normally would, like, oh yeah, they look great, I'm turned on. No, you're operating at a level of energy, so you're feeling your own frequency. And when that's happening, you become aware that this frequency is interacting with others' frequencies in a way that's harmonious or not. And you consciously become aware of that. And it's beautiful, it's powerful, it's amazing. And this is where we're all going to. And if we don't, then we're going to die and just destroy ourselves. And that's not an option that many of us want to live for. We want to do whatever we can. So again, this potential for relationships is something that I take very seriously. And I've decided that I'm going to direct my sexual energy inwardly until I'm in the presence of somebody who's also done that to some degree or whatever. It's just an energetic match and it works. And when that happens, and it hasn't happened to me yet, it's happened in little bits throughout my life, but not at the level that I know it has the potential to happen at. And so I'm unwilling to compromise because I've set that bar for myself. I've experienced the fruits or the labors of my effort to do this. So I know, and I've seen enough outward results that are the result of my own internal process to demonstrate how profound this possibility is. So the point is this: find that divine connection with yourself, make that a priority, and then watch how people, places, and things will support your growth in doing that. And support isn't always uplifting either. It can also be very triggering. It can bring up a lot of stuff that you don't want to face. But as long as you keep going back to that sovereign center, that internal place where, again, when you're in fight or flight, all your blood is going to your extremities so you can run or fight. But when you're not and you're in a centered state of being, all the blood is in the center of your body. Okay, it's in all of these energy centers of your entire being. And that's where all the energy is. And when you're in that state, your heart is open, your mind is open, the parts of you that were limited before are not, they're expansive, and you aren't living in a state of fear. You're living in a state of divine contemplation of like, wow, what's next? And you're not focused on yourself. You're not focused on the selfish nature of your own inner nature. You're focused on the selfless nature of your own inner nature. And that is an energy that wants to interact with and share with others from this greater place. And again, I'm going to end this because I'm starting to get a little redundant here at the end, but it doesn't matter because the things that I'm saying are so important. They're things that I'm experiencing and that others are, and that many of us who are feeling this stuff individually and together know that a lot more of us could be feeling this and experiencing it. And if new relationships are nurtured from this place of self-nurturing, oh my God, we have the potential to love life so much and to love each other and make a better, brighter, more coherent, more incredible world for everybody and everything. And I demand that. I am not accepting anything less of myself than holding myself to that higher standard. Yes, I love myself. I forgive myself. If I make mistakes, I dust off my knees and I get back up and I keep going. But each time a mistake happens or each time something happens, this evolutionary process goes further through me. It evolves more. And I get better and more in tune and more aware, and I get more support, energetic support from the realms we truly come from and go to, and that we are while we're here, right? Because most people don't remember who they were before they were born, and they can't even imagine what they become when they leave this form, or if they leave this form, or whatever. But the reality is what was happening before that and what's happening after that is happening right here, right now, in this being, around this being. And the more we get out of these fight or flight centers of our being and get into the midpoint, right? The heart's the middle. You get into the heart, and that's the gateway to these higher centers. The more we open up all of these static aspects or unactivated or inactive aspects of our own human physiology, which allows us to perceive and resonate with the greater potential of life, then we start to perceive, this energy supports us. We literally begin to experience ourselves as something so profound, so miraculous, so beautiful, and we refuse to come out of that for anybody or anything, and the nature of our relationships reflect that. So again, this is my in-depth, long, subjective, and progressive definition of what divine or sacred union is. And I said a lot. There's a lot that was shared in here. And for anybody who's really interested in this topic or wants to really come to a greater understanding of what I'm explaining here and go back and listen to this. Go, over and over and over and over, because a lot of this is something that you need to do over and over and over and over. Like that level of devotion, like you just keep redirecting your attention and focus inwards. Same way that you'd have a sexual fantasy about somebody, you instead choose to have these life fantasies through these different organs and glands of your body that opens them up and activates them and allows you to operate as a frequency of divine potential, as an antenna of divine possibility. It's happening to me, it's happening to many others, and there's a collective knowing that it has the possibility to happen in a way that the masses awaken. So that's what this is about. That's what I'm doing and so many others are doing. We know this, and we're not going to sweat the small stuff. We're going to evolve, we're going to grow, we're going to face our triggers, we're going to face whatever is in our way, and we're going to bust through the limits that keep us enslaved in a state of suffering, and that causes us to inflict suffering upon others. Because when you love life and life loves you, you want to create from that place, and you want others to be active co-participants in that creative process with you as you do it from a selfless perspective. So I love you guys, and thank you if you made it all the way through this. And please comment, share this video. Let's keep these discussions alive. Like, this is what I'm here to do, is help people come in contact with and to develop this part of themselves. Because I've spent so much of my life doing this, and I can tell you it has been amazing. It has been such a gift. It has not been easy, because I've had to face some dark things that happened as a result of this, but that was my path. It's just things that I had to go through as a soul. We all have the potential to go into a greater expansive state of perception relatively easily. You just have to want to do it more than you want to stay stuck in yourself. So I hope this clarified anything or inspired you to take responsibility for this higher perception, this higher aspect of yourself that you probably feel inside of you or know is there. Again, like this, comment on it, share it. Let's keep this conversation going. And just, I mean, there's a million different directions that I could take this, and I will. But for now, thank you. I love you guys, and have a beautiful day or night wherever you are. Okay.